All right, everyone. Welcome to Invest in Sqft. I'm your host, Matt Shields, and today's episode is going to be a mind bender with the one and only Stephen Montgomery, here to make you rethink your goals and ambitions. Have you ever asked yourself, why not me? Well, buckle up because we're flipping that question from a roadblock into a rocket launcher for success. Stephen's got some playbooks for turning self-doubt into self-belief. We talk about how these are really just opportunities in disguise. So get ready for an eye-opening conversation that could change the way you tackle life.
Yeah, definitely. It didn't happen overnight. So I went from high school, I went to college for a little bit, wasn't really for me, decided to drop out. And briefly, while I was in high school, my dad had been a painting contractor. So he did it for about a year. And I did help him paint during that time. And so he quit doing it. He went and did something else. And so when I got to college, I started just painting for my mom's friends that were realtors and stuff. And my mom was a real estate agent. I paint for her clients. And that led to me just realizing in college, I'm like, I can make great money painting. I don't really want to do college. And so I dropped out, started subcontracting for another painting company, which was okay money. And then eventually just decided I had to do it for myself. I did not have aspirations of I'm going to build this giant painting company or whatever all over the country. I just didn't want to work for other people. I wanted to have the autonomy and sovereignty over my own life and the decisions that I could make and what I could do with my day. And that was my primary motivator. It wasn't so much that I wanted a giant team and stuff. Now I had, of course, visualized what would it look like to add more painters to my team and maybe get some vans and all that kind of stuff. Of course, I thought through all that, but it wasn't the motivation. The motivation was freedom. I wanted to be free. I wanted to, if I wanted to go home early or if I wanted to take a week off or whatever, I wanted to be able to make those decisions and not have to ask anyone. And I also wanted to be in charge of how much I could make. I didn't want anybody else to tell me what I should make. I wanted to choose what I can make through my own efforts.
Yeah.
and determine your own value that way. And so I think that was the primary motivator. And then, to answer your question more directly, yes, it was a huge learning curve for me to learn how to build teams, lead teams, manage reports, get into accounting and projections. And none of that came naturally to me. I'm a very naturally disorganized person.
Yeah.
And I have gotten organized and have learned to value processes and systems out of necessity after learning how important they were.
Yeah.
Not because I'm naturally that way.
And I feel like we all go through that. I'm the exact same way. I have piles of stuff all over the place. And so you obviously made a shift here. You started out having this painting company. You said you wanted your freedom. That was the main goal. Can you remember, there might be something here, I'm going to go in this direction, and describe that type of transition or what that thought process was that flipped, where there's something more than just being my own painting contractor?
Yeah. So are you familiar with the E-Myth?
Sure, absolutely.
The technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. I went through all of that. So I started out as a tech. I started my business with an entrepreneurial seizure, as he calls it. Just, I don't want to work for this other guy. I don't want to subcontract for other people. I want to do my own thing. And then was a great technician. And then eventually had to figure out how to become a manager. And that's when I was able to get to having a few crews and really learn how to manage them and all of that. And there was a really important period in there. And I like to joke that these brushes behind me are a kind of a representation of all the jobs I've quit along the way of growing my company, and really more of the jobs that I've delegated. And because I remember this very specific time where it was like, we're wrapping up a project, my painters were behind, and just taking the brush to go help them figure out how to wrap up this job so we could start the next one the next day. And I had this moment where I'm like, put the brush down, stop painting. And I committed to myself that I wouldn't pick up the brush again. I would not do the work anymore so that I could focus on managing and selling. And then later I had to make that same decision where it was like, I'm not going to project manage anymore. I'm not going to sell anymore. Eventually it was like, I'm not going to talk to customers anymore. And it was me delegating those responsibilities to other people so that I could continue to work on things. And it's very important to do that, but it's incredibly difficult, man.
Yeah.
And there's so many times where you just want to say to your team, move out of my way, give me the brush.
Yep. I can do it. I know I
Give me
can
the
do it
brush, let
better.
me
I
do
can
it,
do it
you go
faster.
home.
Yeah.
But the truth is, like, that works for a moment, but it is never the long-term solution.
Yeah. Well, you went down this path of, creating this company, and at a certain point, I think it shifted into going down the franchise model. Were you familiar with what franchises were, or explain how the entire franchise model came to you or was introduced to you?
So, I was not super familiar with it, no. What happened was I was working with a business coach because we had seen a lot of success and a lot of growth, and I was like, "All right, how do I go to another city? Like, how do I go to 5 cities?" And so he was working with me to build out this business plan that we worked a while on, and was really good thought process for us to work through. What does it take to launch another location in another city and all of that? And so we built out this business plan to go into 5 more cities across
Mhm.
Texas and Oklahoma. And during that process, I started to, okay, what other painting brands have multiple locations? And that led me down the trail of kind of discovering, oh, there's a couple painting franchises out there. And really you're starting to research that. And then during that same time, I had a friend that gave me the book, The E-Myth. And that book, by the end of it, you realize that franchising is this amazing model for business growth. And I asked my business coach, what about franchising? And he said to me, I don't know anything about franchising, but I know a guy who does. And so he introduced me to this guy named Gary. He ended up becoming like a franchise mentor to me, consulted us, showed us kind of all the things that we would need to know about the FDD, about franchise agreements, about how to sell a franchise, how to support your franchisees, how to make sure that they're successful. And I worked with him for about 10 months, I would say. And then we launched our franchise system and it grew quickly after that, but it was not what we anticipated even then. Like, we didn't anticipate the type of growth that we've had.
Yes, that's interesting. And was this focused specifically for painters, basically a painting franchise, or was this? I've seen Resi brands, and we'll get to Resi brands in a second, what that means. But it seems like your hands are in a bunch of different franchises. So I feel like you franchised the franchise model where it's applicable to a bunch of different types of businesses, service based businesses. Am I off base with that, or is that pretty accurate?
That's accurate. So what happened was we common knowledge around franchising was you're lucky to sell 4 or 5 in your first year of franchise. Like, that would be lucky for most franchise brands. So we set out and we're like, let's just get to 20 franchisees. If we can get to 20 franchisees, like, you're out of the emerging phase and you're now like a brand that has some sustainability to it. It has the potential to be healthy. That was our goal. Like, again, like, I set pretty big goals now, but I worked my way into that. I typically would set goals that, like, all right, this is something that makes sense and we can work our way to. And so we were like, let's go to 20 franchise units. I didn't set a timeline. I just said, let's just work as hard as we can to have 20 successful franchisees. And so very quickly we got to like number 7 or so in a few months. And I called my then now business partner and I was like, hey man, this is going really well. We need to up our goal. And so we started to think bigger. Could we get to 200 locations? Could we build the largest painting company in the US? Those are the start. That's when once we saw that it worked and we were able to sell franchises, we were able to get them launched, we were able to get them successful. That is when we then realized we could set bigger goals. And as we researched it, and because we were really spending a lot of time talking to our franchisees and then tweaking the system, and then, all right, hey, how does this working for you? All right, let's improve this. Because we did that, we realized a lot of the systems that we had developed, a lot of the ways of doing things that we were doing in That One Painter were things that would work for any home service brand. Now, there were certain things that were certainly just paint, but there was a lot of things that would work to scale any home service brand. And so that's when I realized, because of that, maybe because these systems work for everybody, like, and it could work for any home service brand. Let's go ahead and see if we can try it with another brand. So we started Garage Up, started testing out our systems on there, and then that ultimately led to us building what Resi is. And along the way, we really struggled with vendors and like marketing and things like that to do a great job. And so we started to bring those things in house as well. And Resi was a bit of an audacious thing at our size and how young we were as a franchise brand to announce and even try. I'll be honest, I think that most people in the franchise world probably thought we were either audacious or even maybe stupid.
Yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? Because it's hard to build a platform brand so early, but we just had this incredible commitment to our franchisees. And I remember the guy that kind of mentored and consulted with us in the beginning, he told me, he said, take, he said this, he said, do everything you can to make your franchisees successful and it will all shake out well for you in the end. And he goes, just focus on that. He's just focus on what makes them successful. And so we did that and we did everything we possibly could to make our franchisees successful. I'll be honest, probably sometimes too much, where there's stories all the time around our office of, yeah, I noticed this franchisee was not having a great week. So I jumped in and called all of their pipeline for them and closed the job.
yep,
That's awesome. But that's not sustainable. We can't do that for everyone all the time. We also just need to teach them how to fish for themselves. But that's the commitment of the culture at Resi is like, if somebody's struggling, get in there with them and help them out. And we just have this absurd level of belief that if we support our franchisees, it'll shake out well for us. And because of that, I think that we were able to grow at a speed and add more brands and do things like adding our marketing agency and whatnot at a level that most other franchisors have never been able to do.
yeah, yeah. Interesting. I want to take a couple of steps back
Yep.
to you mentioned how you were setting these goals and you were meeting those goals and then you were making larger goals, bigger goals. And I feel like this is something that a lot of people have a challenge with. I was actually speaking with another entrepreneur. His name's Bob Prosen. And I asked him this exact same type of question. And he said, the way that I like to talk about this is if I ask you to raise your hand, everybody raise your hands. And everybody puts their hands up in the room. There's 12 of us or so in the room. And he says, okay, now reach higher. You always have more that you can reach that you don't necessarily understand. That when somebody tells you to do something, you set a goal and you set it, here, but you still can go all the way up here, right? Nobody raises their hand and goes all the way up here right away, right? So I'm just curious your perspective on setting goals that are achievable because there's a line here. If you set your goal too high and you don't make that goal, everybody's, oh, that was too big of a goal anyway. We're never going to be able to do that. So setting an achievable goal that you can actually reach, it motivates you and it makes you want to be able to achieve that. So I'm just curious your perspective on how you went about setting those goals and maybe even motivating your team to be able to make sure that they didn't fall into that path of that was too big of a goal anyway. We were never going to do that. Does that resonate at all?
It completely resonates. And it's tricky because you need to be, especially if you're gonna be the CEO of a company, right? Like you need to be this vision caster person who can believe and lead people towards a common goal that we're working towards. And simultaneously, you have to make sure that we can achieve the things we're trying to achieve. And so you can't just be a dreamer without being a doer. And it's a dream without action items is just a nightmare, right? And that's the difference right there is like, how do we achieve the dream? How do we achieve the
Mhm.
goal? And so I think a lot of people get stuck in between two things. And I think it's okay to have multiple things. You can have a dream, you can have a goal, and you can have a projection. And it's okay to have all of them. So my dream is that Resi would be able to answer every single home service need that every single American has. Anything you need anything you need done on your home, in your home, in any city in America, I want to be able to service it. That's my dream, right?
Mhm.
Then I can set some goals of, okay, I'd like to maybe get to this number of franchise units and this revenue in this time period, whatever. And then what you need to do is then set projections for what's realistic for each quarter. And so sometimes the temptation is to just live in dream world. And we also need projections of what can we actually get done today? What can we get done over the next quarter? And so I think it's all okay. It's not which one, it's more of taking the dream and then breaking it down into actionable items that you can achieve. And sometimes you will, like, we have outperformed our goals at times,
Hmm.
and we've way outperformed some of our projection. And then there's other things where we've underperformed and we didn't. In this area, we are exceeding our projections and our goals. And in this area, we're behind. And that's just the nature of business and leadership is then when do you pivot and what decisions do you make to get everything where it needs to be? And you got to celebrate. I would say just celebrate the micro wins along the way, or
Hmm.
at least set them up. And so if you set a goal really big, you got to figure out what are all the other wins along the way that we can celebrate, right? And if you don't have those, it's really hard for your team to stay positive about the big dream. Another thing that you're, you know, talking about there with the arm reaching up is I think when most people look at setting a big goal or setting a dream, you mind if I hit on two things here? Because I think
Please.
it's
Yeah,
really important.
absolutely.
So that the first is that most people will see someone achieve something, or they'll see something, and maybe nobody else has ever done it before, but they'll say, I could possibly do this. And they'll maybe have a dream, they'll start to set a goal and they'll keep it in their mind. And then this is the question that most people ask. And there's two ways to ask the question, but it's the same question. The question is, why not me? And you can ask it from two different perspectives. One is, why not me? It's like this discouraged sort of way of looking at it. And you're going to come up with a list. So you're going to say, all right, you might think, all right, I'm going to build the biggest painting company in Austin, Texas. And then you could then come up with your negative side of why not me? And then you start to come up with a list of excuses of why it won't work. Or you could say, why not me? And you're saying it positively of like, why not me? What does that person have that I don't have? What are they good at that I'm not good at? And you instead are creating a list of expectations for yourself. So you can ask the question, why not me? List of excuses. Why not me? A list of expectations that you need to start working on it. So you might, and it's the same thing. Like you might say, why not me? You're like, maybe somebody's here and they're like, I want to start creating content about investing in real estate and post it on the internet. And then you think, why not me? And then you might go, I'm not as attractive as so-and-so who does that.
Hmm.
Okay. You can create an excuse, or you can set an expectation that I need to lose weight and go get some plastic surgery.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, there is always some sort of action item for whatever excuse you're going to come up with. And you're either the person who's going to settle for the list of excuses, or you're going to change that into a list of expectations that you need to put on yourself and things that you need to work on and change. And I don't think that for most people, it's going to be the good looks. That's just one I say that because it's funny, but people come with a list. Oh, they had daddy's money. They had whatever. And it's okay, go get an investor.
Yeah,
Like they had daddy's money. Find somebody to give you money. Like,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean? Like, you could always do that. And then the other thing is when you have a goal or a dream is that a goal or a dream that is unspoken is just as bad as not having one.
Hmm.
And you have to say it. You have to speak it. You have to do it for your own, you, like your own mindset needs to hear, your own brain needs to hear you say it like out loud to someone. And when you say it and you see someone believing you, that's going to fuel you. For some people like me, when I say a dream and I can see in their eyeballs, they don't think that I can achieve it, that fuels me even more.
Yeah,
But like either way, you're going to get an encourager or you're going to get a doubter. And for different types of people, either one could be. But you got to speak it. You have to say it. Your own brain needs to hear it. Then your brain and your eyes need to see people's reaction. You need to hear people's reaction to it, and it will fuel you somehow. And you will then be actually a lot more likely to achieve it. And so there's all sorts of studies on this. If you say your goals or you write them down, you're more likely to achieve them. But there's a lot of that is incredibly true. And I think that most people have amazing ideas, pretty cool dreams, and they're unspoken, or they ended up with the wrong list when they asked the question, why not me?
yeah. And I'm curious your perspective too, when you're going down this, how you're asking this from yourself, that we'll say the negative and the positive way of doing it. Do you go down the path? Would you suggest going down the path of documenting both ways? Or is it best, again, to keep the positive mindset and only focus on the why not me? Why not me? Why can't it be me?
I don't think that most people are capable of not having some negative. Like, just when people are like, just be positive, that is true. Of course, a positive mindset is better than a negative one. But what if we're real with ourselves? We all have different levels of anxiety, stress, the doubts, whatever. So if you ask the question, why not me? And some of them you're like, all right, these are positives. These are expectations I can put on myself. And then there's also some that are creeping in your mind of some excuses. I would still write the excuses down, and then I would figure out how to change them into an expectation. And like I said, why not me? They had daddy's money. Right? Okay. Now, how do you turn that in it? You get an investor, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? There's always a way around excuses if you will turn them into expectations instead of excuses.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Again, I thought that this was going to be an interesting conversation, just the way that I've looked at how you've tackled other topics and whatnot online. So I love diving into these little nuances and these little
Yeah.
techniques. I do something, and we'll get to this at the end. And I forgot to tell you about this, so it's going to be a surprise. But I do something called life crafting, right? Where every week I sit down and create 3 goals for myself, and then I create the action steps that I think I need to take to be able to achieve whatever those goals are. Very intentional and planning out where I want to go. And these are the steps that I want to try to achieve each week. Right. And we'll dive into a little bit more of that in a minute. But so going back to creating Resi brands and that, do you feel that there are specific industries that you want to tackle first? And what I'm really asking is, have you I'm curious what the thought process is of, you're obviously in painting. That was something that you grew up with and you were obviously already in it. You have the window washing. So is there a stepping stone path that you've laid out that this is the next logical, or you also have the garage kitting company as well.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, like, how do you pick these industries and feel like this is a good thing to get involved in? Is it just jumping in and throwing something against the wall and seeing what sticks, or is there an intention or thought process, easy, hard? I'm just curious how you go about choosing those.
Yeah. So we have spent a lot of time thinking through that. And now that we've grown, we get a lot of opportunities that pop up for us. Just in the last, I don't know, couple months, there's been multiple opportunities that were presented as, hey, this could be a partnership or an acquisition or something. And it was just not stuff we were interested in.
Hmm.
And we've narrowed it down fairly well to what we want to do. And I would say there's 3 categories within home services. There's 2 that we want to prioritize right now, and a third that we want to avoid for now. They could be good models for us later if we could figure them out, but they're not something we're interested in. So the first and the one that I'm most interested in is what I call high ticket subcontracting. And so it's what painting is in most states. It's higher ticket. We're talking $5,000 plus typically per paint job. And most of our work is subcontracting. So it's pretty straightforward. We have those systems down, they're dialed in, it's great. High ticket subcontracting could include roofing, it could include restoration, it could include flooring, it could include a number of others, fencing. There's definitely some that we're like looking at in that way and saying, all right, those are some of the opportunities we like. The other is low ticket reoccurring. And those are typically going to be employee model because you need a reoccurring basis. It's better in employee model typically because you can get more consistency. But it's lower ticket. So that is window washing. That could be something we're working on right now, is like a handyman subscription service where it's maintenance and whatnot. That's not ready yet, but it's something that we've been playing around with. So there's lower ticket reoccurring, tends to be employee model, really good businesses. Pest control would fall under that. There's others, right? Mosquitoes, great model. We're not interested right now because unless we figure something out, they tend to be, unless you do something unique, they tend to be the most difficult business to grow in home services, which is low ticket, not reoccurring. And that means you have to eat what you kill every day, and what you
Yeah.
kill is tiny. So you're just chasing bunnies all day. Whereas like when higher ticket subcontractor, like we'd rather go for some gazelle and antelope and go after an elephant. You know what I mean? Something bigger to go capture if we're going to eat what we kill, and versus trying to hunt little rabbits every day. It's just not enough meat, right? Whereas the low ticket reoccurring is you're farming in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Instead of, if you're going to hunt something big. If you're going to farm, it doesn't matter what size it is, right? Because you're going to farm it. And typically it's easier to farm things that are smaller to produce because it's easier. That's the way we look at it right now. And so inside of that, we're filtering things. And then we don't want too much of a balance we don't want to be too off balance on either side as we're building that. And then there's some that are just so technical or the licensing is so difficult that we're just ignoring altogether right now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. And as you were going through that process, it reminded me of one of your sayings too. And I can't remember exactly how you phrased this, but it was essentially something like, don't concentrate in on the money, I guess the results maybe of whatever it is that you're trying to do. And I feel like you've had a very organic way of having these things happen to you, right? Like even with the Cody Sanchez and her investment, it was, hey, I want to come out and do this piece about you. And that turned into essentially investing in you. So it wasn't like you were out, and maybe you were, and it just happened to come together very nicely. This was an ancillary offshoot off of an opportunity that you had nothing to do with any type of funding or anything like that. Do you feel like you approach problem situations, opportunities with that type of mindset? Is that the way that you typically approach things? Does that make sense even?
Yeah, I think that I mean, like, it's really great what you're saying there, and it's something that's really important to me is that if you're going to seek, like, PR and do a lot of self-promotion and whatnot, that's fine, it's good, like, building a brand is good, it's important. What's a lot more important, building something that people actually would care about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was referring to too. I'm glad that you
Yeah,
picked up on that. That's exactly, yeah.
yeah, like, work on the craft. It's imagine you wanna be, like, a famous painter, right? And I don't mean a house painter, like, you wanna beautiful artwork, right? Don't just try to sell and promote all over the internet your first crappy painting that you did while you were at a what is it, a sip and paint or what,
Yeah.
like, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
or, where you're like drinking wine with your friends and I'm a great painter now. Let me sell them all over the internet. Why don't you work on the craft for a little bit? Get into the craft, build something you're proud of. And when you build something that's good and you build something you're proud of, people tend to, even without you going out there and looking for it, they will tend to start watching. And I think that's something that I think this generation is starting to miss. And you see it because everybody, like the number one thing that kids want to be now is a YouTuber. And it's okay, you want people to follow you on YouTube. And if you want to be proud of it, it means that you're not doing just something stupid every day. It means that you're doing something significant. So go focus on a craft, do something significant, get good at something, and then put it on the internet and watch. Yeah, you'll get the attention you're looking for. So I guess that's what I'm saying is I've just had this same way that we had that bet. Look, if we invest everything we can into making our franchisee successful, it'll shake out well for us. If we do everything we can to make the system good and something that we're proud of, people will pay attention.
Yeah.
And I think people are often getting it a little bit reversed. Not always. There's lots of people doing it well, but there are times where people are trying to get people to pay attention to something that nobody wants or nobody cares about.
Yeah. And I want to ask this question as well. What are your thoughts on uncovering those types of things? Because again, as entrepreneurs, I feel like so many of us, shiny object syndrome, right? They focus on this for a week or two, and then no, that doesn't work. So let me jump over to this and try that. I'm just curious how you go about focusing yourself and concentrating on finding the things that you really doing or you
Yeah.
excel at doing? Is it looking even at some of the assets that you have or that you've built before, some of your history? What are your thoughts on how to find that thing that feeds you and energizes you? Because I feel like a lot of people, again, like you said, they fantasize about being on YouTube because they sit there for hours on YouTube and they think that would be cool to be able to be on that. But they might hate filming and hate the entire process, but it's just the end result that they get fixated on. So again,
Yeah.
just curious what your thoughts are on finding that thing.
I'll talk about it in just general and then maybe in business second. So, like in general, it's you can't say you want the thing if you don't want the steps to take you there. And I'm like coaching my kids' soccer team and stuff, and so I taught one of my sons or coach one of my son's teams in the spring. I'm doing with my younger son's team this fall, and one of the things I just have to remind my kids, I want to be good at soccer, and I'm like, then you have to want to dribble, like and so Well, I don't want to go out and dribble. I'm like, then you don't want to be good at soccer. That's what you're
Yeah.
saying. Because you can't, those two things have to line up, or you don't actually want what you think. And if you want to be good, you have to get the ball out and you have to dribble around. And I have them dribble around the trees like over and over again. And I think that's how you figure out if you actually want what you want or if you're just fantasizing is, do you want to do the steps that take you there? Are you willing to do the steps that take you there? And that's true of all things in life. And then in business, I think people want to be in business because they want the freedom, but then they don't necessarily want the steps to take there. They want the freedom, but they don't want the risk. They want the freedom, but they don't want the long hours, right? They want the freedom, but they don't want the pressure of everything being your fault all the time. And then you can't have your cake and eat it too, as I say, right? You have to decide that I want the steps I want to take the steps to get there, not just the destination. And so what I tell people too that are looking to get into business is that it's really important to fall in love with business,
Hmm.
not to fall like in love with painting homes or fall in love with manufacturing receipt paper. I don't think the guy who's I've got this factory and we manufacture receipt paper is I love receipt paper. The world would not be good without it. They would not know what they paid. And they're like, you would have to stretch it to really find your purpose in that. But maybe their purpose is I enjoy helping the US economy. I enjoy employing people and I find a lot of purpose in creating jobs. I enjoy making money and building legacy for my family and investing so that my children and my grandchildren will be well off. That's where maybe the purpose is. And it doesn't have anything to do with receipt paper, right? And I've fallen in love with business so much. I joke with people that I'll paint houses or create toilet paper.
Mm.
And if toilet paper is my thing, dude, like I'll make that like seriously, I'll find purpose in that too.
Love it.
Like it's important to fall in love with business if you're going to be an entrepreneur and not just fall in love with the idea of being freedom. Though that
Yeah.
is a really good motivator, and it was my motivator in the beginning, you will be tested to see how much you actually care about that.
I couldn't agree more. And I love that you picked receipt paper off the top of your head as being a target business. So fantastic. So we'll wrap up here. I mentioned earlier about the life crafting
Right.
exercise that I do every week. And again, this is a process where I set out 3 goals for the week and action steps
Yep.
to achieve whatever those goals might be. So what I started to realize was that I was making up the steps as I was creating these, doing the things that I thought that I needed to do. And I realized like talking to all these amazing successful people every week on the podcast here. So I'm going to ask them what some of the things are that they do in their own life to be able to achieve different things. So if I asked you what your highest ROI activity was that you have in your life, and this can go either way. Some people say business, it's marketing, and this is what I do. Other people go down a more personal path where it's meditation or whatever it is. And these are the steps that I take to be able to do that thing. If I asked you what is your highest ROI activity, what comes to mind right away?
The highest ROI activity I probably do, and I have done for a very long time, is I take time and let my thoughts spin around my head for quite a while.
Mhm.
And for me, that could be a walk. It could be just sitting out on the patio. It could be taking a long, hot shower and just letting yourself think for a little bit and really letting that, because especially in seasons where you're really busy, if you don't prioritize that and really let yourself process all, and for me, it feels like spinning. It just feels like the thoughts are just going, they're spinning around my head, right? And, and I have to start to narrow them down to singular things that I can then take action on. For me, it's like that time and that process that I have in my brain is like really important. And I get off when I don't make sure that I really process what I need to and think through it. Other than that, I think it's like really investing in key relationships inside of business. And there's no such thing as a self-made man, is what John Maxwell says. And
Mhm.
I have found that to be incredibly true for my life. And so I think really investing in key relationships with people who are like-minded and want to build something similar to you and work with you. And that could be a business partner, it could be an investor, it could be an employee, it could be a vendor. But investing in those relationships that will help you go to the next level, I think is incredibly important. And those would be some of the highest ROI items that I know that really work for me.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. With the thought process too, are you thinking about one specific thing? And maybe this is a question that it could be or couldn't be, but are you thinking about one specific thing that during this focus time, we'll say, or trying to solve one specific problem? Or is it just, I've got a lot going on, there's a lot floating around in my head, I'm just going to sit down and process through all of this? I'm just curious, again, if there's any focus intention, or if it's really just trying to maybe give yourself some time to be able to breathe and let the subconscious take over, and those answers to those problems might just snap right in there. So I'm curious what your process looks like there.
Yeah, it's typically anywhere from 1 to 4 things that I'm trying to think about. It's not just like random thoughts. These are things that I know that we need to either do or fix, or questions I've been asked recently that I'm not sure what the answer is, right? And I'll take a few of them typically. Sometimes it's just one major thing that we're working on that I need to focus on for a bit. And then I'm just trying to think through every possible uh variation of it and every answer, and what's wrong with each one of them. I'm just arguing with myself in my head, and what I'm doing is just trying to narrow down to the best solution that I can take literally the next day. And typically it's if I process information in my head and I literally just focus for a bit, like I will have a light bulb moment that then I can go either act on that night or the next day, and it gets us going in the right direction. And it's for me incredibly valuable that I have that. That may look completely different. Some people, maybe that's journaling, or it might be creating lists or whatever. I don't write anything down until I have my thoughts straight.
Yeah, yeah,
Once
yeah.
my thoughts are straight, all right, let's create a list. Let's create a task list. Let's work on a business plan. Let's whatever it might be, right? But until I just get the ideas in order and how I need to act on them, then there's no point in writing anything down.
Yeah. And I want to just touch on that real quick, because this is, again, where I was thinking as you're going through this process. Again, you're running a company, there's all kinds of things going on. Do you have any type of a process to be able to document? You mentioned before you're really getting into processes and systems, obviously, again, very successful. Documenting the things that you even need to think about and then being able to refer back to those? Or is it just these are the hot button issues that are stirring around my head that keep hitting me in the face, and this is what I'm going to focus on right now? I'm just curious if there's any kind of a process that you go through to be able to remember everything that you have to even think about.
Yeah, it's both. I keep little short lists in my phone of things I'm like, all right, these are the ones that maybe I should think on or spend some time researching or whatever I need to do. And then there's other times where if like you can get enough of the ones that are pressing or urgent or the fires or whatever done, or at least delegated well, then you get to then go back to like, all right, the future thinking things. And that's actually way more fun. Those thoughts are a lot more fun, is now
Yeah.
you're thinking like, all right, what's step 3, 4, 5, and 10, right? After this first step of fixing this issue or whatever. And it's really important to book time for that as well, right? And I typically personally I have a lot of time blocked on Fridays for that type of thought, because the rest of my week is typically pretty booked with meetings. And yeah, it's both. It's both for sure.
Got it. Got it. Love it. Love it. Yeah, this is, again, I knew this was going to be a great conversation, and all kinds of topics that I kept having these offshoots hit 'em, or spring into
Yeah.
my head as you're going down, telling your stories. Again, all kinds of things that we could talk about. But if people want to learn more about you or any of the brands or anything that you're doing, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolute best way is to go to resibrands.com, RESIBRANDS, resibrands.com. You'll see different socials, you'll see all of our brands, you'll see all the information about what we are doing. And I think if anybody's looking to get into home services, it's a great place to at least check it out and at least learn a little bit about it. And yeah, that's where I
Beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah, love it. Stephen, thank you so much for the time today. This has really been a great conversation, and a lot of good nuggets here today. So this is going to help a lot
Yes.
of people.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Excellent. And that's a wrap for this episode of Invest in Square Feet. I hope Steven's killer insights on turning Why Not Me into your personal success rocket have gotten you fired up to rethink your challenges. If you had fun hanging with us today, hit the subscribe button and drop a review. It helps more go-getters find us. Remember, success isn't just dreaming, it's doing. Keep hustling, keep growing, and we'll see you next time. Until then, stay driven and keep investing in the best version of you.